It's John Dial and Dave Gardner here. I'm going to do a little bit of an intro on some of the work and activities that we're pursuing here at Sogeti around DevOps, continuous delivery approach, as well as the Capstone reference project that we use for all of our new hire training, our estimation training classes, and various other activities for really ramping up and working on our ability to follow best practices within Sogeti. So, Dave, I know you've got a lot of things that you've been working on here as far as automating the processes for our team that's working for Dell, including use of TeamCity and a lot of the more advanced concepts around continuous delivery and integration. So, if you would, I'm going to turn it over to you, and please share with us.
Thanks, John. Some of the important things that we're doing along with just doing a continuous deployment is we've really, with this Capstone project, again, this is really born out of the activity we saw with our college grad program. As you all know, you and I were heavily involved in the grad program, and one of the things that we took an opportunity to do during that time frame was really focus on DevOps and CD, even talking those with the grad. So we took that approach along with them to set up things like Visual Studio Online to allow them to be able to do automated deployments and automated testing. So we took that, was born out of that, and said, hey, as we're building out a kind of a DevOps-oriented reference implementation, we focused on something that was easy for everybody to understand, so we just took the Capstone project and ran with it. Because we already had the implementation that the students had done, and so we leveraged a lot of the thinking that the students had done around the business model, and we focused around what did we really want to add to it. So we took with this a very TDD, test-driven design and development approach originally, and started off with just building the tests and building that out from there, which led to a web API, a web UX that we've built, and really allows us to focus on being able to use a choice for VSTO or GitHub and for this one, we're actually using GitHub today to show, okay, it doesn't matter what version control system you're using, but what really focuses on is featuring deployment over, or focusing on a feature over, or deployment over a feature maybe.
Great.
And that allows us to really narrow down on doing a deployment first. And so you'll see here with us taking a quick look at the Sogeti Capstone web project, you'll see that we've got an API here, we've got our core logic and the web project itself. But as you can see, I'll pull this guy in the screen here. We've actually set up our Capstone in TeamCity as a pre-built build. And so that build will allow us to, anytime anybody checks in code, you can see Ryan Wishnow, who's one of the developers on the project, checked in some code 8 days ago. And what that allows us to do is, back to the Capstone project, is not a working project or work in project for a customer. It's something that we're all contributing to. So we're really taking an open source contrib model to this, and just about anybody can contribute to it.
Right. So real quick, if I could ask Dave, for those that maybe aren't as familiar with TeamCity, what is TeamCity's role in this whole process? What's the value that tool is bringing?
It's a great question. So the two major tools we've used for this is TeamCity and Octopus. And Octopus is for deployment. TeamCity is for build. If you're looking at any kind of true DevOps, you want to separate those two concerns. One tool is going to be really good for the build side, running tests, running the automation tests, and another one may be building and deploying all the way to production. So if you wanted to build to a dip environment, run a test, TeamCity will orchestrate that for you. Octopus will do the deployment.
Okay.
And so TeamCity really does a great job of being able to do that.
So it really takes away a lot of the things that historically we've done manually in kind of a bit of an error-prone manner, actually, with a lot of lag.
And that's true, and it makes it very repeatable. So Ryan, for instance, has never comes into this on a daily basis. Once we set it, we kind of forget it. It's kind of like that Ronco model, set it and forget it. But it really does offer a lot of flexibility because the engineering team owns this. As we want to do more, add in different kinds of unit tests, different kinds of BDD tests. If you're using, let's say, a Cucumber-style test, business test, you can add it in here and run those tests along with your build so that you can verify quality before you go to production.
Fantastic.
So if I'm going to come back here, you'll see here that if I go ahead and make a quick change to this and say, we'll say our Sogeti DevOps reference application. I can save this, make sure the guy compiles. I don't even really have to do the build locally. If I know it's going to compile, I can make that choice. I can run it here if I want. But really what I'm focused on today is I'm just going to go ahead and show you that if you're using something like GitHub, it noticed that I have made a change to this file. And I could commit that. But we're not going to use that tool. We'll just simply come in here to the dev tool that we're used to doing, and we'll go ahead and do a commit. And notice that we have no outgoing commits right now, so we'll go ahead and say, hey, I'm going to go do a commit. We're going to put our little note in here, DevOps, our commit, a comment. We'll call it DevOps for life, and we'll go ahead and commit that locally. So notice that it's committed. And once I say sync this and I start to push this back up into GitHub, what will end up happening is, and inevitably with a demo, this will take a little bit longer, so I'll talk through it. But what we'll notice that I'm not touching the keyboard, no interaction is going on. What's happening is Team City is sitting here and polling GitHub right now. You can set up for webhooks, so whenever there is a promotion up in GitHub, it'll push down here. But it's just as easy to set this up on an interval and have it go check for that build. Or if I decide that this is going to take too long and I really need to push this build immediately, I can actually go ahead and just run the build. But notice in my little time talking, I've not touched anything, and it's pulling down our source from GitHub, and it's going to go through our multiple build steps to enable that.
So if we've got multiple team members working on a project, this really is a way to speed up the execution of the combined unit tests and the functional tests and verify that everybody's code is truly working together in one deployment.
And to that extent, and that's a great point, this build will not push out to our Azure site unless all the functional tests pass. So it actually blocks us from moving forward to the next line. So you're also trusting in the quality of code or the quality of the product more specifically has been assured before going all the way to production.
Wonderful.
So you have those level of phase gates. While it's finishing up this build, there's a couple of different tools that I talked about in here. One is Team City. If you come over here and while it's finishing of our build, and it's actually creating our Octopus deployment as we see now, and we see this is build 135 to 134 was previous. If I come to into Octopus and I go to our project for Capstone, you'll see that at some point we'll see 135 is actually running right now and deploying out to Azure without me actually touching a thing. It passed its tests, it's done its build, verified, and is now actually doing its push. So if we come out here and we say, oops, and I open up our Sogeti Capstone, which is really great about having this up in Azure. This is the free Azure website. There's no cost to us from a Sogeti perspective, but I was able to deploy this to this and maybe show a potential customer, hey, this is how the software is progressing. It really gives me flexibility. It gives me a great amount of flexibility to show in a working, almost a mock-up way or progress in a project. So often when we're doing these longer-term projects, and they go a month or two without actually seeing any working software, this allows them to see this right up front. And notice that you see our new comment here. I had to do nothing, and it deployed it out there once it was totally handled.
And I see on the bottom right-hand side here, it's got the build numbers and some additional details there.
And that's actually a great point. As we go do the Team City build, we tag that. If you notice that I go back to the source code, you'll notice that in our assembly info for this particular project, I'm not doing anything special here. So I'm not creating that build number here. Team City did that for me and tagged this with the assembly info modifier as a trigger or a feature on that team build and did that for me.
So let's take a scenario where maybe I ran into a problem. I just did this deployment and there's an issue. I want to go back to one of the earlier versions. Is that something that we can do?
That's a great point. So if I come back into Octopus itself, you can see that it has kept a running history of the different deployments that I've done.
Okay.
So let's do something completely radical. Let's go back and say, I'm going to go back to build 106. That's way long ago if you saw the numbers. And I can say, I'm going to go ahead and just say deploy this right to our local tentacle to do MS deploy to Azure. So I'm going to select that guy. We're going to deploy it now. And that's the 106 build. We've done our deploy, and when we go back out to the site and we refresh this, it takes a minute because we've actually redeployed the site, so it's doing all its jig compile in the background. There's no funny business going on here,
Okay.
and you'll notice that.
Oh wow! So we've got a completely different site, completely different look from that earlier version.
Right, and you can see that right here it tells us it's build 106. So we've successfully pushed back to this previous version. If you're to ensure there's no smoke and mirrors in this, we can go back to our releases, go back to our 135 build, and it's really quite honestly this easy to redeploy a package. It might get a little bit more challenging when you have a database backending it and you're going to reapply migrations, but that's the beauty of DevOps. It allows me to say, I may leave my backend model the same, but decouple my UX, and I can change the UX back and forth. There's lots of different ways to handle this, but once you have the desire to be able to go forward and backward in releases, to be able to roll back, to really control what features and functions I'm going to release to production on a regular basis. You look at some of the large e-com out there, all our favorite like Amazon, they're launching hundreds to thousands of new features out to Amazon daily. And because their whole business is built on this notion of being able to show customer value instantly.
Yep.
And what we're doing here is really beginning to enable that. And if we go back here, we do our refresh. Probably should look to see if it finished, but I trust the tooling. It hasn't let us down yet. We'll roll back roll forward to the 135 version, and now you can see that we're back to where we were at.
That's outstanding. Well, Dave, thank you very much.
No problem.
Really neat to see what the team's been putting together, and I'm excited to see this progress forward.